Welcome to episode 3 of this collaboration between the Common Change podcast and the Liminal Space podcast. This is Tristan.
And this is Rashid.
And today we're talking about hope.
Mm-hmm.
A quote that we learned from the guests on this episode is one by Paulo Freire from A Pedagogy of Hope. And it goes like this: the idea that hope alone will transform the world and action undertaken in that kind of naivety is an excellent route to hopelessness, pessimism, and fatalism. But the attempt to do without hope in the struggle to improve the world, as if that struggle could be reduced to calculated acts alone, or a purely scientific approach, is a frivolous illusion.
That's a powerful quote.
So, Rashid, hope seems to be few and far between these days.
Yeah, kind of. It does. And when it does exist, it seems to be such a futile or such a candy floss kind of hope.
Yeah,
Which is lame.
yeah. So in this episode we were introduced to the idea of critical hope. And it comes from a paper written by Duncan-Andrade. Suggests that there are 3 false hopes, what you alluded to. But the one equals hokey hope, which is this idea of being optimistic despite there being evidence to the contrary. In other words, hokey hope ignores the structural conditions entirely. I like to say that's like pie in the sky, you're just being hopeful. And then we have mythical hope, which positions an individual's success as proof that a system is working. So, for example, we have a black president, and that means that everything is fine and fair. And then the last false hope that Dr. Duncan mentions is hope deferred. This is where the prevailing system is recognized as not working, but that takes the blame for everything. So in essence, you become paralyzed because the system is broken and wrong. And so no matter what you do, you're not going to change it. And it causes complacency and not acting on anything.
So that could be like an idea of like hope one day in heaven, for example.
Yes.
Yeah, it's deferred. So it's not a possibility on this earth.
Correct. It's deferred to at some other time, the reality will change, the material conditions will change.
Yeah.
Those are useful to acknowledge before we get to critical hope. Critical hope is something that takes into account all of that, the current situation that you're in and the possibility of what might come. So it's the refusal of both cheap optimism and also paralyzing despair. And you are grounded in the honest structural critique paired with committed action.
Sure.
So Andrade writes this in the context of education and working with young people, but I think it is relevant for us as well.
Yeah.
Try and maintain a critical hope that is grounded in reality, but it doesn't leave you there with like, there's nothing I can do because the situation is so big.
Exactly.
And so this was introduced to us by our guests, Ashley and Helene.
Ashley and Helene Visagie are founders of a youth organization which is called Bottom Up. It's based here in Cape Town. And Bottom Up develops socially engaged leaders who can critically analyze how political, economic, and cultural systems produce inequality and then organize to change them. They work from an intersectional perspective, positioning young people not as future citizens in waiting, but as active co-constructors of a more just and sustainable society. So, yeah, they really do cool and amazing work. And I think you know them a lot better than me.
Yes, I was a volunteer with them on one of their public speaking programs, and then they liked me so much that they invited me to serve on their board.
Nice.
So I'm now a board member at Bottom Up. And
so basically you're biased, so we mustn't listen to you.
I will be very biased towards this organization because I do love them.
But I'm not biased, and I'm saying they're amazing. So you can believe me, not Tristan. So yeah, what will follow is the excerpt from the episode we had with them. And you'll hear Ashley's response to a question that we had asked, which was along the lines of what is the work that needs to be done given the current reality in our world and in our schools.
I think maybe I'll just come at it practically and then try to abstract from there. But I think what we haven't said yet is like there's a turn in bottom-up's work where we began to focus on doing things like youth critical action research, talking about social justice, trying to get students thinking about how power works in society. And I think that turn was quite a significant turn for us, because it was almost saying that we don't feel that we can continue trying to plug gaps. In as much as it's really nice to be able to sit down in the afternoon, and have a game of chess. Like, we were saying, like, we only have so much capacity. What are the ways in which we want to commit our time and our resources, and what kind of work do we want to do? And so for us, that was working together with young people and almost, in a sense, democratizing tools of critical thought, like critical sociology, the kind of things that we were busy learning and reading about. Like, how do we make this accessible to young people, for example, who've never, had a conversation about capitalism, How do we have conversations like that and try to make and do it in accessible ways? Or when they think about what's going on in the schools, get people asking, so if our toilets aren't working, like, why aren't they working? As opposed to just coming in and fixing the toilet, or asking a company if they can't come in and do something. Ask why is it like that in the first place, or who's supposed to be responsible for it. So I think that was a big shift in bottom up. And I think, to come at your question maybe a bit more directly then, and to work from that, I think it's about being human with each other. And more than just being human, but also I think what capitalism does, and what all of these oppressive systems do, is they alienate us. They alienate us from our work, they alienate us from each other, they alienate us from the environment. And so when we talk about becoming human or being human in the world, is to kind of repair those relations. How do we imagine futures that, where we aren't stripping the environment of everything because we have a profit motive, where we aren't, sitting on Netflix or whatever it might be, because even our social time has been privatized in a sense. And so schools, healthcare, housing, water and sanitation, whatever it is that you think about, is all affected by these things and is all in need of repair, is all in a state of dysfunction. And so I think the work that needs to be done is, how do we begin to imagine new ways of engaging in all of these different spaces and spheres, repairing those disconnections almost that's there.
That's good. Well, I know earlier on we spoke about, I think, Ashley, you mentioned hope, and you both introduced me to this idea of critical hope as a concept. And my understanding is that we actually need that. We need a level of hope to achieve this new imagination. I think there's a lot of people who would say, like, a lot of people are saying South Africa's on the verge of collapse, so alarmists, people, or whatever. There's a certain agenda like that, but also like the world's crumbling around us with catastrophes, environmental stuff, political stuff, all of those kinds of things. So I guess a question about how do you maintain, or what is your kind of view of what is critical hope? How can that help us? And then, Helene, you, in the same vein, you had mentioned something about this idea of the rose and the concrete or something. That's quite an interesting idea that I think reflects some of that.
Yeah, so, I think the idea of critical hope, I think that does inform a lot of what we do. I think it's difficult sometimes to keep it. The beginning of Bottom Up was this, I think, from the Andrade article, it talks about hokey hope. We're going to keep telling you a lie. Just work hard, just do the right things, and you're going to make it in this world. And I think that's what we were kind of going for. And I think that's where we got to this is false. We cannot continue to tell students this is how it's going to play out. Yeah. And also for them to stop seeing themselves in the deficit view, or their parents. I mean, their parents are working really hard. That doesn't mean... But they don't always see that way. It's like, well, if my parents just made the right decisions, if they worked harder, they would be in a better position. And realizing that's not that way. And actually, I think that's part of critical hope is, how do we really see things for what they are, and be able together sit with that pain together and to say, I really care about that. What can I do for my individual part? I think it's a small part because there is still always this idea of care, but how do we change this systemically and for the broader society? So for me, critical hope is really being, firstly, telling kids the truth, but they're not getting stuck in this idea, which I think Andrade also then refers to, deferred hope, where we hope one day that everything is going to be rose, but we are all actually feeling really hopeless and defeated that this is not going to happen. We're not going to realize this ever. And so that also alienates you again from each other and from the system. But then really trying to put things in place or do things together, I think is supporting adult and child relationship to move forward. I think the idea is we always want to move forward and not stay stagnant in one position, and then reevaluate, are we making progress? How do we get there? So that would be the idea of critical hope.
So yeah, there's some really, really amazing thoughts that came from Ashley and Helene. And there's one particular thing that I love, which Ashley spoke about. He was talking about how, as an organization, Bottom Up got to this place where they decided to stop plugging gaps. And we all see it, obviously, in our context here in Cape Town and in South Africa, and I'm sure in other contexts in the world as well. You see the issues, they're very visible. And then it's almost like, okay, like Ashley said, the toilet in the school is not working. Let's fix the toilet. But then the door breaks or the window breaks. Like, so to start asking questions like, what is going on? Contextualizing it in the context of the city. There's some schools where if that happens, it's fixed before you can even blink, you know? So asking those questions, like leaning into systemic things as well. And as part of their kind of shift that happened was this idea, as Ashley said, where they thought to democratize tools of critical thought. And just for context, they're working with teenagers. It's like high school, which is so cool. That's absolutely amazing. Like, I think of, in my context, where I learned about critical thinking, I was like an old man, like in university. And maybe to ask you as well, Tristan, on your side, when did you start thinking about things critically and, you know, engaging with the world through critical lenses?
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know when that fully happened, or am I fully doing that now even? But a big moment for me, I think, was when I was in high school and I had an economics teacher who just gave me language for what was going on in the world at that time. So just talking about the economics in South Africa, the different economic policies, and he would often bring in relevant global events that was happening that caused me to think differently and to ask questions of the world. Which is, now that I think about it, was such a gift.
That's
cool.
Cool.
I think these days I'm thinking more about how important critical thinking or independent thought is as well, because we have so many different things that are vying for our attention and can guide our thought in a different kind of way. And so it's important for us to stay human and hold on to what humans do. So we should be good at critical thinking.
Exactly.
And I think it is a battle because there's so many things that would want us to not think for ourselves.
And I guess that one thing that critical thinking can do, again, if we engage with ideas like hope, and we engage with that critically, it can create a kind of hope that is embodied, steadfast, and which takes seriously what is actually going on in the world, you know. But then also is courageous and brave and said, but there could still be something different. We can all be part of making it so, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's the balance also in what Ashley and Helene was sharing with us, is the questioning nature, the critical thought about our current reality, being realistic, but also being hopeful. And that does lead into imagination. So you doing it simultaneously. It's like, okay, we're trying to critique the current structure of the world, but we also try and imagine something new and building, actually not just imagining something new, but building towards that new thing.
Because the reality is, when you're critiquing the current structure of the world, you're actually critiquing an imagination of the world. The status quo world that exists was imagined by someone or by people. So we're actually questioning that imagination, which means that you certainly have to then, and it's a beautiful thing, progress into a new alternative imagination. So Yeah.
And maybe importantly, what you're saying now is that someone imagined the current world order the way it is, and then they put massive amounts of resources into making it so. And so it's a question for us about, if we are imagining a new world, what are we putting towards that?
Yeah.
Of all sorts of resources, our own thoughts and critiques and all of that stuff, but also like physical resources, money and land and power and all of this kind of thing. Where what are we putting in towards that new imagined world? So we thought to end this episode, we could do something interesting and allow ourselves to imagine what a new world could look like in our vision of what a new world would be. And so I am going to invite you into a 1-minute thinking exercise, just to try and draw out what your reaction is to what a new and better world could look like. So find somewhere comfortable to sit, and then close your eyes and picture a street that you know well, maybe your street, your neighborhood, and imagine that it is 20 years from now. What is it that you notice first? Not the politics or policies, just what do you see? Who is sitting outside? What are they talking about? Is there laughter? What do the children have access to that they don't have now? What has been built that nobody thought was possible? What has been given up to make room for it? Hold that picture. Don't judge it. Don't edit it. Just notice what your imagination reached for. And then come back to the present and open your eyes. And I'd invite you to write down whatever it is that you saw and see what's there. What is your vision for a new and reimagined world?
So thank you for being with us today, and we'll see you in the next one.